I'm Allison Jonjak, the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. These videos are the on-demand recordings of UW Extension and the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association's virtual brown bag lunch series. These monthly sessions offer growers and researchers a way to share timely and relevant information. We hope you'll enjoy and continue to engage with us.
Hi, I'm Tom Lochner, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association. We're excited to be a partner with Extension to bring you research-backed resources, tools, and tips to keep Wisconsin marshes productive and profitable.
So thank you for joining us for our March virtual brown bag. Again, as we are in the growing season, we have things that are more growing season focused, but in this time where we're watching the ice come off and starting to plan things, happy to take some feedback from the education committee and give you presentations on things that are, also of good use to your marsh. We've had people ask about the worker protection standard inspections that DATCP sometimes goes through, and said, boy, it'd be nice to know in advance what all those safety processes are and what they're checking for, so we can feel prepared in the event that that we have one of those inspections on our marsh. So we have Alyssa Foss and Mark McCloskey with DATCP here to go over those with us. Tom, if you want to say a word or two in welcome, and then we can let Alyssa and Mark take it away.
Thanks, Allison, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon, good Friday afternoon. I'm not going to talk long at all, but I do want to thank Allison and Alex for setting us up, as well as Mark and Alyssa for joining us. Also, for those of you that joined a little bit early, you notice Allison talked about we do have closed captioning. We're trying that in response to some requests from growers, and UW subscribed to a service and it seems to be working. So we hope that's useful to you as well. This is, again, one of our continuing brown bag seminars. We learned during COVID that we can take advantage of the Zoom platform to deliver information to growers in a timely manner, routinely, that we think is an effective communications tool, but it also saves a lot of travel for growers to be going to meetings in and around the growing area. So with that, I just welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it back over to Allison.
And if you have questions as the presentation is going along, feel free to write those in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box, and we'll ask questions to Mark and to Alyssa as things go along. But Mark and Alyssa, worker protection, safety inspections, how cranberry growers can ace them and keep their workers plenty safe.
Yeah,
take it away.
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Alyssa Foss, and I also have Mark McCloskey with me. And we will be talking to you guys about the Worker Protection Standard Program. Just kind of giving a brief presentation about what that program looks like, and then what our inspections look like if we were to step on establishments and do an inspection. So just for starters, the purpose of WPS is that it was originally issued by EPA in 1992, and it was recently revised in 2015. So the primary intent of the regulation is to reduce the risks of illness or injury to workers and handlers resulting from occupational exposures to pesticides used in production of agricultural plants on establishments such as farms, forests, nurseries, enclosed space production facilities such as greenhouses. So under WPS, workers are those who are performing hand labor tasks in pesticide-treated crops, such as harvesting, thinning, and pruning. And then handlers are those who are in direct contact with pesticides, such as doing the mixing or loading, or even applying the pesticides. So what is WPS, or how does it apply? So there are three main areas that will determine whether an establishment must comply with WPS. So if you are raising a crop or a product that is to be harvested, you are using a pesticide product that carries an agricultural use requirement statement on its label, and you employ handlers or workers or family members as part of your operation. So if DATCP were to come onto your establishment to conduct a WPS inspection, there are 6 key areas related to the inspection. And so we'll review the central information, which includes pesticide safety and application information. We will look at pesticide safety training, ensuring that your workers and handlers have been trained annually. We will look at decontamination sites. So are you providing soap and water at a reasonably accessible site? The application restrictions, ensuring that proper signage is being posted in accordance with the restricted entry intervals on a label, and any early entry restrictions as well. There's also personal protective equipment. So making sure it's in compliance with label requirements and ensuring it's of good quality, as well as family exemptions, which focus on specific label provisions and PPE, and then handler and worker interviews, where when we conduct those, we'll ask brief questions of someone employed on the establishment.
So thank you, Alyssa. This is Mark McCloskey with the department. A brief introduction of myself. So I've been with the department for about 27 years. I started off with all within the same bureau and investigation compliance section. In front of you, you'll see a map showing our 14 field investigators. I was one of those folks for about 17 years. I then was an investigation program manager, which meant it's a position where they deal with all non-compliance issues for investigations. Then I was a supervisor, and I am now currently the investigation compliance section manager. And given the opportunity to do the presentation today, I didn't want to pawn it off on anyone else because I knew talking to you folks would be so much fun. I wanted to tag team with Alyssa, so thank you, Alyssa. The map you see in front of you, I know you can't read everything, but it's just to demonstrate that we do have 14 field staff throughout the state that would conduct the WPS inspections. They are given assignments within their territory. Sometimes they do cross territories based on availability. Some folks have been in the armed services and get called away to duty once in a while. So they're not rock solid, impenetrable territories, but by and large, that is each of their home base areas. Next slide, please. So when these folks show up at your marsh and they want to do an inspection, all of them have a state ID. You should feel more than welcome to ask them for to show you their ID. It's usually something clipped to their belts and a little plastic cover, and that is to give you extra vote of confidence that you know who you are talking to and they are employed with the state. They also have business cards, and you should be more than happy, if you're not offered one, to ask for a business card. These folks will then tell you that they're there today to initiate a WPS inspection and would ask you if you have time for with them to participate. We understand that normally all of our inspections are unannounced. That means that when we show up, you may be in the middle of a task that you can't stop, and we need to work with you regarding that. We don't make you stop, drop, and roll. That wouldn't get us very far. And we recognize that. So normally we understand that people need to take phone calls, people have tasks. We would not expect you to just, again, stop everything and give us all your immediate attention because we're there. It may be that we even agree to come back 2 hours later or something of that nature. So we'll work with you on that. They are going to try to determine if this is indeed a good establishment to conduct this inspection. They will talk to you about your workers. Do you have workers? Do you have handlers? Do you have family members that are immediate, which maybe we'll get to in a few more slides, because they're trying to see how much of that WPS applies. Some part of it will always apply. We have what's called a tier 1 inspection. And if you've applied a pesticide with WPS language in the label, and it's within the last 30 days or since the REI expired, that means that it's going to be a very applicable inspection because certain items will still be present for us to view during that inspection that are required to be out there, like decontamination sites and central location information. So again, it's usually a very quick introductory period, a little bit about your marsh, who we are and what we're going to do. And then it's assumed that we're going to kick into the inspection process. Next slide, please. So going back to Alyssa's last slide before I started talking, there was 5 major parts to worker inspection. And I'm going to just dive right into the first one. The first one is the central location information. Oftentimes we'll see an image like the one in front of you there, where you see that there's some hazard information, which is the safety data sheets. There's some pesticide application information that's given number 2 up here. And number 3, there's the pesticide safety information, which is normally, we just call it the EPA poster, the WPS poster. Next slide, please. Here's an example of some of the stuff that we've seen at an inspection site. The one thing I would mention, in the top left, you'll see what we call a farm map. And it looks like a lot of very small, this could be a pick your own type operation, or a vegetable, public vegetable stand where there's just a lot of crops, because it looks like there's a lot of small fields. And those fields will be numbered and labeled as fields, let's just say 1 through 88. And then on the second photo to the in the middle top, you'll see a key where you have, I believe, the name of the pesticide, the EPA reg number, perhaps the name of the active ingredient. They'll tell you if there's an REI or not, and you'll have that information. Over on the far right of this photo, you'll see some application information. And again, when it says site of application, instead of describing the field, you can go back and refer to the photo on the left and say it was in field number 4. And assuming your pesticides are numbered in the second one, 1 through, let's just say 1 through 28 there, in field number 1, we applied pesticide number 7 from that list, and then you have a few more pieces of information. So most operations will set these up as a key, and it works very well, and it's very slick and very efficient and effective. Next slide, please. At the central location, one of the things you also see sometimes is, how do you post this information? Here's a site where one of the portable restrooms is indeed a restroom, but they also threw an extra one on the trailer, and they actually put the central location information inside the restroom, probably because it was an extra outhouse, and it was also out of the elements and would be kept legible. And they found that a good use for that device. So that was pretty ingenious. So here's a joint decontamination site with central location information, each one in one of those houses. Next slide, please.
Okay, so the next part then, after the central posting and information that we'll look at, is the pesticide safety training. And so this is another requirement of annual training of workers and handlers. So the training must be completed annually for workers, and it must be done prior to performing tasks where WPS pesticides have been applied within 30 days or the REI goes into effect. And then handlers must be trained prior to performing tasks, so working with the pesticides. If anyone doing worker or handler tasks are certified applicators, then they do not have to complete the annual training. So we'll ask about the training material used as well, and I'll get into that in detail on the next few slides here. But the training must be given by a qualified trainer, and that is someone who is currently certified as a pesticide applicator or is trained through the EPA Train the Trainer program. And then we'll also look at the training records that need to be kept. So the training program can either be presented live in person or using a video provided by PERC. And PERC is an organization that stands for Pesticide Educational Resources Collaborative. Their website is pesticideresources.org. And so this is kind of the main hub for everything you would want to know or need for pesticide and WPS information. It is a great website that has a ton of helpful tools. I'll be sending some of that information over to Allison and Alex, who then can distribute it out to you guys after this presentation. So what we'll look at then is where were the workers trained And was it in the language that the workers speak? So if English is not their primary language, then the training will need to be presented to them in that language. So a translator may be needed if possible. But then the space that you're giving the training in, just make sure it's a quiet space that's free from distractions, easy for everyone to focus on the presentation. So then records for the worker and handler training. So once the trainer has given the presentation either live or through the video that you can access on PERC, you need to keep records for 2 years of who was trained. And so those records need to include a worker name, address, signature, the date of the training, who the trainer was, and what their qualifications were. So are they a certified applicator, or did they take the course through the EPA Train the Trainer program? What is the employer's name? And then what training material did you use? So was it the video, or did you do a live in-person one? So the training resources that I keep talking about, the Train the Trainer course, where if you're not a certified applicator and you need to get your workers and handlers trained, this course is available on the PERC website, and that is pesticideresources.org. You can access this course online. It's a self-paced. I think it's like 12 modules, and it's going to include a couple quizzes. It is $35, but then once you take it, you're good. You don't have to continue to complete it annually. Like with training the workers and handlers, that does need to be done annually. And then the training materials after you take the Train the Trainer course. So whether you want to give them a PowerPoint presentation, use a flip chart, use a video, those training materials are also available on the PERC website. And then there's also another resource. It's called NEPSEC, and that's National Pesticide. Oh, I forget what the SEC stands for, but it's npseccstore.com, and they also have training materials available there as well.
All right, thank you, Alyssa. I'm going to pick up here. Before I go, just to comment on Alyssa's last slide, in all my years in dealing with WPS and the growers, whether they be apple growers, potato growers, cranberry growers, it's very seldom that I ever found that anyone had elected to send someone to a Train the Trainer program. It's certainly available as an option, but by far the choice, the primary choice to get a trained trainer is to simply use one of your certified applicators. So as Alyssa stated, a certified applicator is equivalent to a trained handler or worker. I mean, they're trained for both, and they are also able to train handlers and workers. So as an establishment, if you have a certified individual, that certified individual can conduct all your training, again, using the materials that are approved and so on. So that's probably what you're most familiar with. Next is decontamination sites and supplies. Just wanted to briefly mention, again, Alyssa explained earlier what a worker and handler is. Handlers, you'll see, require more protections. And again, they're the ones that are dealing with the concentrates or spray solutions, and probably, therefore, not probably, but therefore, have exposure issues that are different than workers who are dealing with material that has been sprayed, some days ago, and performing hand labor tasks sometime after an REI is expired. So for your workers, when they are in a field that's been sprayed within the last 30 days or an REI is expired in the last 30 days, they should have available for them, and within a quarter mile of them, a decontamination site that would have 1 gallon of water per worker, soap, and single-use towels. It's interesting, for water, they always provide a amount, but for soap and single-use towels, soap would be an appropriate amount. Again, that's open to interpretation. And single-use towels, I'll just leave it the fact that it's plural, but use your own judgment. Same with the handlers. The only thing different here is you'll see that the 1 gallon goes to 3 gallons. And then there's also a change of clothes. How do you comply with that? Generally speaking, what we would see at the decontamination site would be a bag, perhaps a Ziploc bag that contains one relatively large size, so it encompasses, could be used by a Tyvek suit. The purpose of that is that if anyone were doused, so to speak, with concentrate or spray solution, they would be more likely to feel comfortable disrobing from whatever got exposed, if not all their clothes, and having something to jump into. So hopefully they could have a space like that outhouse we saw earlier, and get out of their saturated clothes, clean up, and then put those clothes on. That's the purpose for that change of clothes. It's not a change of clothes per person. Alyssa and I talked again for the presentation, but there should be at least a change of clothing. And for a shirt and pants is really all that's required. Eye wash, when eye protection is required on the label, if you read the label and it says the applicator or the person mixing and loading must wear eye protection, that means there should be 6 gallons of water for that handler available. Plus, for the applicator, they need to carry a pint of water. And the examples they give in the how to comply manuals talk about in immediate reach. And the examples they gave are someone who's actually got a belt holster with a quart of water, so to speak, or a pint of water in that holster. I mean, on them. If you all of a sudden went blind, they wrote this rule in such a way that you should be able to reach out and grab that water and clean your eyes out. I mean, it's in a cab, it should be right next to you in the cab. So oftentimes that's something that's overlooked, is having that eye wash. It's normally on site or present, but it's not immediately accessible, which means within reach. That's a little tricky one. Next, please. Again, I mentioned the quarter mile, where we locate these decontamination sites. They should be outside a pesticide treated area. That seems to be common sense. We won't want to send someone into a treated site that's under an REI to go to their decontamination site. Another tricky one was at all mixed load sites. So sometimes we find operations where they are using a relatively nice building with a great restroom facility that has running water, soaps, single-use hand towels, and so on. And as long as you're a quarter mile from that, that's great, especially if that's right at your mixed load site. But then that same facility will have in-field mixed load sites. They make a vineyard, for example. They may mix and load it throughout the vineyard as they go. Well, because you have now in-field mixed load sites, you would have to have that decontamination site right with your mixing loading equipment, so that it's there for you while you're mixing, loading, and handling, again, the concentrates and solutions. So that one can be overlooked. And then they also need to be at places where you have set aside or dedicated for removing personal protective equipment and changing. Next, please.
Okay, so then the application restrictions. So the biggest idea here is to keep workers or anyone else out of an area being treated, which is known as the application exclusion zone. So the restricted entry intervals from the pesticide label must be followed, and that will dictate the type of notification that needs to be provided to workers prior to that pesticide application taking place, whether it be orally or by posting or both. So if you're using a pesticide that requires a posting, the signs that have to be posted around the field must stay up through the REI and then removed within 3 days of the REI's expiration. And if you have early entry workers entering the field before the REI has expired, you have to provide information about the activities that specifically those workers would be performing, as well as provide them the proper PPE listed on the label, and then all the decontamination supplies that Mark just talked about. So then what is an application exclusion zone? So think of this as like a bubble that would follow around and move with the application equipment as it's working in the field. The size of the AEZ is going to be based on the method of application as well as the droplet size. So in this next slide, I got this poster here. I know it's kind of hard to read, so I'm just going to say it out loud what this says. So workers must be 100 feet away from the application equipment as it's going through the field, if the application is using an aircraft or an air blast sprayer, if it's a fumigant, mist, or fog application, and the spray is extra fine, very fine, or has fine droplets. So then it drops to workers have to be 25 feet away. If the spray is medium droplets or larger droplets, when the application is made more than 1 foot above the ground, and all other applications that would be outside of those requirements just do not have to fall under requiring an AEZ, that application exclusion zone.
Alyssa, that AEZ, was that part of the 2015 revision?
Yes.
Yes, and again, hopefully you folks have heard about that. It did cause a lot of phone calls to us. It does pose some interesting issues for us because the AEZ zone does extend beyond the property of the establishment, or it can. So if, for example, for a typical row crop that you might be farming up along a road, if you start to apply and you see someone with a stroller going down the road or a bicycle coming by, and they would be, within that AEZ zone, you would have to stop that application or suspend the application until that situation changes. In other words, they've gone by, or it could be cars also. But, before that, most off-site activities limit your activities on your own property, and this AEZ was quite controversial regarding that. But if you have any questions about that, we'll talk about how we can resolve those questions, at the end of our presentation. But it was very interesting. Personal protective equipment. What is required on the pesticide label? Is PPE provided and worn by a handler in good condition? And then
you're really excited.
It's all been reviewed.
Respirators, medical evaluation, annual fit testing, training records, retention. There's a lot packed into this slide. The one thing I'm just going to focus on, this WPS regulation is one of the only regulations, the only one that I'm aware of, where you not only have to provide the PPE, but you have to, and you are liable for your employees wearing it. In our world, in a more not joking, but undertone way, we call it the babysitting rule, only because it's not true in other sectors that don't need to comply with WPS. So the landscape industry, the structural pesticides, people that apply to your house, my house, or our lawns, they don't have to comply with WPS. Yes, their employers need to give them the personal protective equipment and provide it, the stuff on the label. But if the employee chooses to wear it, it's a violation of the label, but of the applicator, not the employer. That is not true and not the case with WPS. So as an establishment, yes, you need to provide the PPE, shoes, shirts, socks. They're required to supply that themselves. Everything else in the label, as an establishment owner and employer, you're required to provide them, and you must assure that they're wearing it. That's a little added level of reliability that I just wanted to share with you. So if you see someone not wearing their PPE, that would be a violation of you and possibly them also if they're using a product, because it would be a label violation. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. And then at the bottom part, which I think we'll get into a little bit more later to some degree, is respirators. And there's a lot that goes along with the evaluations and training records and so on. So thank you. Next.
Okay, so then some of the last parts of the inspection. So we talked about the big main areas of what we would look at while doing an inspection. And then we also mentioned early on that there are exemptions if you have only immediate family members as your workers, handlers, and applicators. So what those exemptions are is first, if you are falling into that exemption, you still must follow the pesticide product label as well as the PPE requirements that are on that label. You would also have to follow any AEZ restrictions that we talked about, as well as the restricted entry interval requirements. If you are required to wear a respirator per the product label, you still must have a medical evaluation got to go through the annual fit testing and training of how to use the respirator. And then most important is that you have to keep those records for 2 years with the respirator.
And at the end of this hour, I'm going to give a quick review of how to do the respirator fit test, since I know some of you have relied on outside suppliers for those in the past, and this year our infrastructure is a little different. So I'm going to go over how to do those on site.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. So then when you do fall under the exemption for immediate family, you are exempt and you don't have to provide safety training. You don't have to display the pesticide application and hazard information at a central location. Don't have to provide any decontamination supplies such as soap or water. And you don't have to meet the minimum age requirements, which is 18 to be a handler or early entry worker. So essentially what we'll be looking at is just kind of what's on the pesticide product label when you fall under the immediate family exemptions, and just making sure that you are using the product according to label.
Thank you, Alyssa. One of the, I guess the way we've set up the inspection form, one of the tasks towards the end of the inspection is actually interviewing a worker and a handler if they are present. We certainly are going to ask some questions that we've alluded to here on the screen, but what we're trying to assess is the program that you've initiated going to be effective at giving enough information to your workers and handlers for them to assess certain situations and protect themselves if necessary. So generally we will ask, how long have you been employed? You know, do you recall being getting safety training? During the safety training, did this establishment tell you where their central location information is? We'll ask them what a pesticide is. We'll perhaps ask if they've ever heard of anyone getting sick from a pesticide, you know, at the site. It's really not that long of a process. We will not interview folks that are under age 18 who are minors. I believe, listen, did we, I think we looked at that yesterday. Workers can be under 18 and handlers are over 18. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So we will do our best to ascertain whether or not that's working. I personally like to focus on the central location information. I certainly recall talking to some employees at the central location board and saying, if you were asked to go work and I would point to field number 4, can you tell me how you would use the information here at the central location to tell me when the last application was there, and show me how you would do that? And they could demonstrate that. I would also ask the worker or handler, if there's been an REI in effect, how are you informed of that? Is it verbally or is it by posting signs? The signs that are posted need to be taken down within 3 days after, well, they can be taken down after the REI expires, but they have to be taken down at least 3 days after. And I'll ask them, are they aware of signs that are up permanently? That's about it. It's probably a 10-minute conversation with each person. The last thing we want to talk about, the next one, Alyssa. Last thing I want to talk about is possible violations. So right off the bat, I want to tell you that, you know, again, I've been with the department for 27 years. I've been the investigation compliance director for about 7 or 8. Cranberry growers do not come across our radar screen that I'm aware of for non-compliance with WPS or very many applications, anything involving pesticide applications. So by and large, what you are doing, you keep doing because you're doing it right. I know that Jane Larson, the predecessor to Alyssa, had spent quite a bit of time with the cranberry growers, I believe, and maybe it's a name that many of you have known, but you do an exceptional job, has been my experience in complying with our regulations. It is always the case, especially with this rule. It's a big rule. There's a lot of requirements. If you're not familiar with it, this presentation today probably scared the bejeebies out of you because there is so much, and all you got today from us was some key concept and high in the sky concepts about what's in the rule. But there are a lot of things. And that means when we show up, I can tell you that your field investigator is anticipating to find some things that need to be tweaked. That's not the end of the world. What we're hoping for when we don't show up is someone says WPS, other than 3 letters in the alphabet, well, what is it? What does that mean? That's not a good thing, but it happens, and we'll work through that. Generally speaking, we're looking for a facility that's made a great effort to try and comply with those general key concept areas: training records, decontamination sites, central location areas, providing supplies and PPE and respirator fit testing. Those are the big areas. If we find someone who needs tweaking or isn't doing any one of those areas in general, they would get a written warning notice from us. And those written warning notices, I'll grant you, they can appear a little bit intimidating. They talk about, future violations could lead to financial penalties and blah, blah, blah. I will tell you that from an internal perspective, they simply are a form that we use to document that we've had an educational opportunity with an establishment. It would lay out the fact that we found something wrong and we're expecting something to be fixed. And that normally is always the case, and things are fixed. I've determined a long time ago that if I was going to get into the regulatory business, which was, I never graduated from high school going, that would be a great career choice, but I wound up there. If there's any group of folks that you'd want to regulate, it's people in egg production. They're good people, great people by and large, want to do the right thing, and they support most of our rules and regulations. There's just so many that it's hard to comply with them all, and we understand that. So again, my key point was continue to do what you do. You're doing a great job. You have a great association that supports you in your efforts. That's been our experience. And so for possible violations, just looking what's up there. Again, the warning notice, just look at it as if you ever were to receive one, look at it as a notification that we've documented we have an educational opportunity, and go from there. We will always leave an activity report or provide you one eventually. Sometimes we go back to the office, we fill those out and send it to you. It will outline all negative findings and would inform you of things that need to be done. If we fall short in that, then we fall short in doing our job. That's what we're supposed to communicate through that activity report. If indeed you ever do get a visit and there's so many negative findings and you get a warning notice, you may be subject to another inspection the following year, just so we can switch back. To give you an idea of how many we're doing, I believe Alyssa in her program asks for about 50 inspections per year. We are touching slowly and making a dent in the state with WPS. And as you can imagine, from Christmas tree growers to apple growers to potato growers to cranberry growers and family farms, large, they all need to comply. And so there are a lot of potential inspection sites out there. So you may be a marsh who never gets inspected, which I'm sure will cause you great heartache. But it's possible that it'd be quite some time. And some of you perhaps want to consider yourself lucky enough to have had one of these inspections. But again, at the very end, you're going to see my number. You're going to see Alyssa's phone number. If you are a little bit anxious about wondering how you would do not hesitate to call us. We can put you in touch with your DATCP investigator that would, do that inspection area. And if we also believe that sometimes an ounce of education can prevent a pound of regulation. It's time well spent. And if you would like to meet at your invite, you could even be off-site. I used to meet folks at A&W restaurants or anywhere where we grab a soda and we could talk about a rule or regulation for an hour and a half. We get up and we leave. And hopefully that person left knowing whether or not their site was in compliance or things they had to go back and fix. But if you would like to do that, we would be more than happy to meet with anyone who wants to know more about our regulations in a more proactive way, rather than just waiting for the inspection. And if you'd feel more comfortable meeting us off-site, we're more than willing to do that too. So with that.
And that was kind of our motivation with having this this today, just to give people the opportunity to get a little education and make sure that things are, feeling held together there. We're starting to have a few questions come in. I don't know if you guys want to go through the last couple of slides if you have any, and then we can go through question and answer.
Yep, that was our last slide actually. Mark, we kind of cut you off. Did you have anything else to add to that?
No, I talk so much that's good. You have to cut me off once in a while. That's good.
Okay. Yep. So like Mark said, this is our contact information. We'll be sure to give it to Allison and Alex and they can forward it along to people. Otherwise, it is available on the DATCP website. If you search for worker protection, you'll find my name and email address as well as phone number. So pretty easy to get a hold of. And then that PERC website that we kept talking about, like I said, the link for that is pesticideresources.org. That is kind of a catch-all for everything WPS.
Allison, we're available for questions until you cut us off.
Fantastic. And as I say, and Alex, thanks to Alyssa providing all these, has got the kind of a packet that we're going to send out once this is over that includes both the resources that Alyssa and Mark mentioned, along with the fit test stuff. Have had a couple of questions. I'm going to start with this one. How about, do our harvest employees, they work on our marsh for maybe only 10 days after any pesticides are applied. Do those employees need to receive WPS training?
So am I correct in understanding that they're working in the marsh 10 days after an application?
So we have to hire more people during harvest just because it's more work to be done. So during harvest, maybe for only 10 days out of the year, we'll have temporary workers who will work for us. No pesticides are applied in the immediate run up to harvest because we're following our pre-harvest intervals, of course. So there's no active chemical being applied.
I'll throw out my answer, and then Alyssa can build on it. If your employees are working in an environment where there's been no pesticide applied within the last 30 days, the answer is no. They would not need any training for as a worker or handler if it's been 30 days. If they're on a site that has been received an application the last 30 days, they may need to be trained as workers. Alyssa, anything else?
Nope, I think you covered it. That sounds correct.
Okay, thanks. That one applies to pretty much all of our growers. So I know that's a popular question. Another one, just wanted to clarify. It sounded like you said the employer is held responsible if there's a penalty because a pesticide label requires PPE and the employee was refusing to wear it.
That's
Is that
correct. As an
Mhm.
establishment, you are required to provide the PPE and assure they're using it.
So that is a high standard of responsibility that we will have to hold ourselves to.
Yeah, it's so high and so different that I'm glad they caught it, because that was my point. It's an odd duck.
Okay. Another question, when mixing and I hope I'm understanding this right, feel free to unmute yourselves and clarify or type more if I'm missing it. When mixing restricted use product, wearing a Tyvek suit, how can you have water on your person without contaminating the water source? Oh, got it. Okay, so if I'm supposed to hold eye wash water in my belt, how am I not contaminating my eye wash water?
Yep, I think the belt was, so the eye wash water that you're wearing on your person is for applicators while they're making applications. And so it would have to be on the outside of your Tyvek suit. Or again, if you're riding a piece of equipment, it could be next to you. But while you're performing a handling task of an applicator, if you all of a sudden something got in your eye and you can't see, you need to be able to reach out and immediately grab it. And I'm not promoting on the waist belt. That was just, I know that in the WPS How to Comply manual, that's one of the examples they give. It may not be appropriate for everyone.
Okay, but for my ignorance too, does this eye wash, for example, does it have a lid? Like, am I able to open the lid? Does that count, or is the lid to make it too hard to access?
No, I think that would have a lid. And I think in Gempler's, for example, Gempler Supply Magazine, they sell these 1 pint. It could even be a plastic top, like a tear off, and then you have access to the water. So yes, it would have a lid or a cap or something of that nature.
Okay, so hopefully that's how we're preventing contaminating our rinse water. Do we have any other questions on any of the material that Alyssa and Mark have shown?
Allison, if I can, this is Tom, and maybe Mark or Alyssa would want to answer this, but as you go out, and especially in the cranberry marshes, what are the 1 or 2 things that you see that are areas where we can improve so that we're in compliance with WPS?
So Tom, this is Mark. But as far as common WPS violations. Having untrained workers or handlers is still a very common violation, because a lot of them will concentrate on bringing in workers, and they have a worker orientation day and so on. And then inadvertently, thinking about many things, employees may come and go. And the next thing you know, you hired someone in July and we show up in August and someone snuck into your operation and they truly haven't been trained yet. So having an untrained worker or handler sneak in under your radar for a while isn't unheard of. The decontamination sites, I will mention, for example, the gallons of water, those are the minimum amounts that must always be available. Sometimes we'll find folks that will set out the right amount of water, but they don't replenish it for quite some time. And when we happen to come and do our inspection, the soap is still there, the hand towels are gone, and there's 10 gallons of water left for 75 detasselers. But that, again, that's not specific to bogs or marshes. Those are just some of the things that come to mind. The day of discovering folks that just don't have any compliance with WPS seem to really be diminishing. Most folks have gotten off to a good start, but those are the things to tweak: keeping your supplies at decontamination, making sure you still have your trained workers or handlers, and as an establishment, your record for each of those. From a liability standpoint, I would just point out, if anyone ever wants to come and say that I was harmed due to exposure of pesticides on your property, and they claim, you certainly would want, and I'm sure I'm not surprising any of you with this, but it would certainly be in your best interest to really have proof that this person did or did not work on your establishment. Where we find that more of an issue, again, maybe not so much marshes, could be with our detasseling cruises. So you want to make sure you maintain those records of who works for you, who worked for you, and who was on your property, working for you. Hope that helps a little bit. Alyssa, anything to add regarding common violations specifically for marshes?
No, I think you hit it on the head. That was just about everything I was going to say as well.
Thank you for the question, Tom.
Any other questions for Mark and Alyssa? So any other last questions on the topic at hand of the worker protection safety inspections? Anything else that you guys want to hear? I'm happy to. All right, here's our question came through. How often does a hired weed wiper using Roundup need to be retrained? So for a general use pesticide as opposed to a restricted use pesticide, how does that answer change, Alyssa and Mark?
Go for it, Alyssa.
Sorry, trying to find the mute button. It would still be annually.
Annually?
So for this rule for applicators, there is no distinguishing differences really between RUPs and general use. Obviously, you need to be certified to apply the RUP, but from the WPS perspective, all pesticides are equal for being trained handlers and workers. And as we had in our presentation, you must be trained as a worker or handler annually.
Thank you for that question, because that's something I wouldn't have guessed myself. So it's good to get that that additional feedback from our experts.
Yeah, Allison, one other thing I wanted to mention for anyone on our joined us today, the numbers that appeared at the end for Alyssa and I, when you folks call us, we do not need to know who we're talking to by name or marsh or county. We're just happy to have someone call us and utilize us as a resource. So if you're intimidated by calling, a regulator and asking questions, please don't hesitate. We don't have special software that links up the satellites and pings you at a location. Nothing. We're lucky we have calculators. So please feel free to give us a call, and we'd be more than happy to ask your questions. And you basically can remain as anonymous as you would like. And we just welcome the phone call and look forward to being a resource for you.
Fantastic. Thank you.